Hi, my name is John. I go by Johnny. Last name is Donovan. My pronouns are he and him. I am a person who identifies as queer. I am a gay man. I am not a native to Glendale. I'm not even a native to California. I am, however, a United States citizen. My dad was stationed in the Air Force, and at the time when my mom was pregnant with child with me, we were in Missouri. And so I was born on an Air Force base, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri outside of Kansas City. And due to a series of very unfortunate events, my mom and myself found ourselves back in California where she was raised in Northern California. And so it was in Stockton that I call hometown. So Stockton, California is my hometown. And I moved to the Los Angeles area at the tail end of 2019. However, I had been living in Orange County since 2005. So from 2019 until the present day, I have been living in Glendale, California. I wanted to work at Disneyland. And when I started to date it wasn't technically my first boyfriend, but my first long-term relationship, we decided that we wanted to work for Disney. And at the time I was working at the Disney store in Northern California across the street from my college. And so one spring vacation when we were down here enjoying the theme park, we decided to go into the casting office and apply for jobs. And magically, I got a job then and there. So we went back up north and started preparing to move. So we moved to the Orange County area. We lived in Anaheim, Fullerton, Yorba Linda, all those fun cities. And I worked for the Walt Disney Company for nearly 15 years. When I started, because I already had experience with retail at the Disney store, I was cast in a front of house position on Main Street. So I was working the retail shops on Main Street, and it was there that I grew as a lead and then eventually became a manager. And I managed basically all the lands except for Frontierland, although I did babysit them occasionally, but I basically managed all the lands at Disneyland Park. And then I was also given the chance to launch some couple of events like D23. That was one of the ones that I first started with. I also launched a couple of initiatives throughout the retail campaign, like when we did a couple of new merchandise. I was there for the launch events. I helped kind of give my input for some of the merchandise that was being developed. And then I was also part of the attractions team for a short stint. So I managed all of Tomorrowland attractions. And it was there that I really decided, and it was something that has always been part of my life, is that I wanted to be a creative. And so going back to school, I said, you know what? I'm gonna focus on marketing at the time, but creative in the sense of I like film, I enjoy storytelling, I'm also a little bit of an actor. So it was after 15 fun, long years, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start something different. So after that, I became a marketing manager for a fashion manufacturing company in downtown Los Angeles. And that's what brought me to Glendale, is I was looking at the cities that were nearby, and there was just something about Glendale that I loved. I was looking at the map and I was like, wow, there's this fun diamond-shaped thing, which I learned later is because it's the jewel, so it looks like a jewel. But that's actually, it was looking around and I was like, wow, you know what, there's a lot of things to do. There's restaurants, there's a library dedicated to the city, there's you know, the malls, so many great opportunities here in Glendale. And so it was really that beautiful kind of aesthetic, and also 1930s. I love 1930s houses, so that's what I moved into, was a 1937 house. I shared it with a roommate, and so I guess that's a long story. I'm gonna say, to quote Sophia Petrillo, picture it, Stockton, 1989. So what happened was The Little Mermaid came out in theaters, and boy, if I didn't know by then, oh, I knew afterwards. My goal in life was to find Prince Eric. That's what I wanted. And my dad tells the story that when I was young, maybe around 2 or 3, that when we were shopping and we would see the magazines all in a row in a bookstore, that I would go over to the muscle magazines and just caress the cover, like as if I wanted to touch that man. So he's like, I knew at that point that that's what you wanted. And I was like, well, obviously. And so I also did things like I dressed up like the Disney princesses. I mean, I remember cutting up a rug to be my fins for Ariel, or wearing a pillowcase as pretend hair, or wearing it as a skirt, and all sorts of things. So for me, it was never really a question of who I was. I just knew that I was different from everyone else. And so for me, also, the story of The Little Mermaid helped me to understand that and identify and understand that, similar to Ariel, I was like a fish out of water. It was almost like I didn't belong here in this straight world. Like I was something much more magical. I was a fun unicorn that didn't belong. And so I needed to find my way over the rainbow. And growing up in a rural part of Central California, Los Angeles was also seen as that over-the-rainbow Oz. And so ever since a child, I wanted to move because I felt that being somewhere where I was understood, or somewhere that kind of accepted me, even though I didn't really know what that meant, just subconsciously I knew it. And, you know, even though I understood that I was different, I didn't really know what gay was. That really wasn't a term, especially in the time period that we're talking, in the late 80s and even into the early 90s. It wasn't something that we really talked about. Although I remember being teased as a child, you know, being called faggot, or, you know, being also physically abused as well by other kids. And that's actually what led me to be pulled out of the school that I was going to and into a new school where I met my best friend. So good things happen. And we've been friends now for over 27 years. So we were established 1995. That's when we met each other. And he came out later in life. He came out at 30. So it was like the two little gay boys found each other. It was amazing. And so when we talk about, you know, when I came out, although there had all been those years of, you know, collecting dolls and pretending to be the wife when we played house, or wanting to be a Disney princess. And even when I was 16, my cousins and I would put on plays, and I wanted to be Snow White. So here I was wearing a dress and all, and yet I was still telling everyone in my family that I was straight. I mean, I don't, whatever. But when the time came, I was 18 years old, and I said that I'm going to finally come out. I mean, by that time, I kind of understood sexually what that meant. And so I decided, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with my family, if they will or will not accept me. Obviously, I was hoping that they would, but you just never know. And one of the things is that I do come from a religious background. Doesn't mean that the people who are religious are necessarily not going to accept you, but I wasn't sure. And I think that that's one of the stigmas that I, as an adult person, are working to change. And that's really one of my goals. And so I came out when I was 18 years old. Oh yes, when I told everyone, basically the response was, yes, and like, oh, well, if it was this easy, why did I wait 18 years? Why wasn't I out at 4? You know, and that's the thing, is that people, as the world is changing, the ideas about when to come out or when not to come out are changing. And that's, again, that's something that I'm working towards. So when I meet kids at events who are 7 years old and like, oh, that's the bisexual flag, I identify as non-binary, or whatever it might be, it's mind-blowing to me, because it's like, my God, like, you haven't even gone through puberty yet and you already know who you are and what you are? That's crazy, but that's the state of the world. And I think it's awesome. So the only people that I was really concerned about telling was my grandparents. When I told my grandpa and my grandma, I was really nervous. I was sweating, and partly because after my mom and I had moved to California after the divorce, we moved in with my grandparents, and they really became like my parents, because my mom was a single mom, she was working a lot, and so I was often with my grandparents. And I really felt like if I didn't receive their affirmation, if I didn't receive, you know, their love, I was afraid of losing it. And so those were the people that I was scared to say. And even though I had been dressing up as Snow White, my grandma still, basically to quote her, was, "You're what?" I said, "I'm gay." "You're gay?" "Yes." Everything wasn't? No. I don't know. But I mean, she accepted me afterwards. It's just she truly, I don't know. Like, was it an act? Was she truly in disbelief? Was it something that she was just, like, I guess you tell yourself, like, oh no, that's not that. And I think she was born in 1928. So, when you grew up throughout the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, I mean, being gay was heavily taboo. Like maybe in the 20s it was acceptable, but I feel like after that, it really kind of became something that wasn't talked about, and especially throughout the 50s. Now the 60s and 70s changed a little bit, so I think that that's the reason why my parents were a little bit more accepting. But again, I was closer to my grandparents. All throughout school, I had been teased for being gay, even though I wasn't even out, but everyone knew, and I knew. But it's just the fact that I wasn't ready to accept it. And so when I started to tell people, I remember the first person that I told wasn't even really a close friend, but she and I had bonded because she was bisexual, or at least she claimed to be bisexual. Later, she was a hardcore lesbian, but that's okay. So it was someone that I was able to identify with, and because she was out, I felt like I could come out. And I remember telling her one day after school, she used to tell me, she's like, you were so not confident. Like you would hunch over your backpack, like, you kind of like would like slink around like in the background of like the place, like not really wanting to be called attention to. And she said, afterwards, you just blossomed. And that's what I loved. And so one day after I'm slinking towards her with my backpack, I tell her, I was like, hey, Erin, I have something to tell you. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I can't even say it with a straight face. I'm like, I think I'm bisexual. And then she's all like, oh, okay. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. And then we walked away, and as I turned around, I was like, no, I'm gay. And then she's like, I know. So that was the first person that I told, ever. And so I had that quick 10-second turnaround of being bisexual. It was an amazing experience. My whole 10-second life as a bisexual. Anyway, so after that is when I started to tell my closest friends. I started to tell, family members. And again, no one seemed really shocked. But I think the thing is that the family members, because they had had all that experience with me, it really wasn't something that was too terribly difficult. Like I kind of just said, hey, something to tell you, like this is what's going on. My closer friends, I remember we wrote this whole long note back and forth, like, oh my gosh, I have something to tell you, like this and that. And it was just kind of like a back and forth. And the funny thing is I was coming out to my best friend who was gay as well, but he was just seriously repressing himself. And that does have a lot to do with religion. I mean, for him, it was just that idea, like, I got to be that good Christian little boy. Like, I can't disappoint my family. I can't do this. I can't do that. And so for him, I don't know how it felt. That would be an interesting to kind of hear his side of the story. But for me, I think that I knew he was gay. And the funny thing is that, 12 years later, when he finally came out, he tells me he saw like, I have something to tell you. I was like, what? He's like, I'm gay. And I told him, I know. So I guess that's a lesson to be learned to everyone. You think that you're really trying to cover yourself up and you're probably doing a horrible job at it. So just be yourself. But yes, to answer the question, I think that there was a little bit of a difference. And then for the straight people around me, other fellow students, I mean, it really wasn't even like I cared about what they thought. Like, it was more like, I'm not even gonna really tell people. I'm just gonna show up and be myself. And, in high school, there were some restrictions over what we could and could not wear. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of things. I mean, whether it's your job or, at school, how you express yourself and how you're able to present. And so anyway, there's long stories behind that. But, I was suddenly wearing, goth bondage pants, and not just goth clothes, but it was the girls' goth clothes. So I'd be in hot pink fishnet, like hot pink skull shirts, like pink bondage pants. I mean, everything that you could think of. So the thing is that I really felt like I set that trend way before all these people started to do it, where they, it's like, oh, I'm gonna be a guy, I'm gonna paint my nail. I was painting my nails in 2002. So you know what? I had them hot pink, black, and everything else. So That's the thing. Again, it's like I feel like the work that we do is setting the course for the next generation. And my best friend loves to tell me, he's like, you didn't give a shit what they thought. I said, of course not. I was going to be who I was. So if I was there wearing, even as a kid, I remember, wearing Disney princess shirts when they didn't make them for boys. So I would buy the girls one, but I was, 10 years old or whatever. And my dad supported me. So again, my stepmom coined the term fairy goth. She's like, you're just living your best life, baby. She's all like, you look amazing. And she really encouraged it. And she was one of the people that was really ahead of her time. She was part of PFLAG. She was out there supporting me. And when I finally did decide to come out, she also had talked to my dad previously, and she really made it easy for me. So again, I think it's important that you have those supporters and those allies in your life. And so whether you identify as queer, or if you know of someone who does potentially identify as queer, or even if you think, hey, I just want to be supportive of everyone, remember, you never know who's looking to you for guidance, for someone who maybe feels a little lost, or like, hey, I'm not really being accepted for who I am. If you can accept everyone, and if you can make a difference in that one person's life, again, you set the tone every single day. So just remember that.